Hello, welcome back to Fred in his Shed. I hope you're all well. This will be the first proper radio review of 2025. And I have a feeling, even before I start, this one might be a little bit controversial in the comments. And we'll get round to that in a moment. But the radio on the bench, as you can see, is the CHOYONG or CHOYONG. It's the latest version of their LC90. Going to be a long video. So get yourself comfortable, get a cup of tea, coffee, fill up your vape tank, and I hope you enjoy the video. We'll get started in a minute, but I just want to mention the quality of the packaging that the radio comes in. They do really present this nicely. Comes with a very firm foam rubber surround, so the radio is perfectly supported. Definitely keep the box. Sometimes you just throw them away, but definitely keep the box with the lid. Keep the radio nice and safe. Now, my radio also came with this rather nice fake leather travel case. If I get this out of the bag. Because this is the perfect travel radio, really, because we've got the internet radio stations, and there are about 40,000, I believe, of them. And then you've got the standard FM, medium wave, shortwave bands. So if you were thinking of using this as a travel radio, you may be interested in this padded, rather nice travel case. However, when I looked on the website, it appears that this may be an extra. So just bear that in mind, that if you're just going to use the radio at home, you probably won't need that, because you can just keep it in this decent box. But for travelling, yeah, you might want to spend the extra and purchase that. Finally then, we can take the radio out of the box. Let's have a look what we get. So in the box, okay, we'll come back to that. I think that's the user manual. Alright, okay, you know what I'm like with user manuals. I'm not going to say too much at this stage. We have a little lanyard wrist strap. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is a heavy radio. I think it would fit in there maybe. This isn't going to be a radio you're going to hang off your wrist. Might be okay maybe as a safety measure, but yeah, not so sure. It's quite nice quality though, to be fair. But yeah, it's not something you're going to hang off your wrist. And then we just get a standard USB-C, yes, USB-C charging cable. Do not get a charge brick or an adapter, but obviously we've all got those with our mobile phones. Right, this appears to be the owner's manual then. Let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, I have to be honest, I'm a little disappointed with all this presentation. I thought we might get a nice glossy colour owner's manual. There's a lot to learn on this radio. It has a lot of functions, and we are stuck with this. Maybe there's a little 2D barcode at the end that we can go onto a website, and it might be a PDF format. So here we have then just basically instructions on all of the buttons. There is a lot on this radio, and it just seems to tell you what the buttons do as far as operating the radio goes. Yeah, it's clear. It is clear, and the English seems quite good, but that is very basic. And on the back, again, we have the specs to the radio, troubleshooting, adjusting bandwidth, things like that. Okay, and it says that you can go to their YouTube channel. There might be some tutorial videos on the YouTube channel. Okay, yeah, not great. Really should a nice manual you can sit down for a cup of tea or something and read would be better. So we're going to have to sort of find our way around the radio. We're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, and we're going to have to sort of press buttons and see what happens. So let's just turn the radio on. Just hold down the power button there for a few seconds. Quite a nice screen. Looks about a 2-inch screen to me. We'll go through some of the specs on the radio. Incidentally, if the screen is flickering on the camera in real life, it's absolutely rock steady. And it also is a very nice clear screen. It's about, what would you say, 2.5 inches? I haven't measured it, but it's colour screen LCD. It's perfectly clear on the radio itself. So we'll just go through some of the specs on the conventional radio. FM 64 to 108 megahertz. Tuning step rate 10 or 100 kilohertz. So it does have a very fine tuning step rate, and again that's for the DX band, so from 64 up to this normal 88 in the evenings. In the UK, if you go outside, you might be able to pick up some DX stations. Medium wave, 522 to 1710. Step rate can be set at the usual 9 or 10 kilohertz, or a fine step rate of 1 kilohertz, which is quite rare on medium wave. Shortwave, 2.3 to 30 megahertz, everything in between. Again, step rate for that is, I believe it's 1 to 5 kilohertz, and then it has a fine tuning for sideband only, which we'll be testing out later. It does cover the CB band and also the ham bands on sideband. When it comes down to the internet radio, uses 2.4G Wi-Fi, but also has a 4G SIM card slot, which I believe is underneath here somewhere. So it's possible to take it on your travels. I guess you could use the SIM card out of your phone, or well, I suppose most people, you just buy a cheap pay-as-you-go SIM card. I wouldn't have thought it's going to use a lot of data just for radio. So yeah, just buy a cheap card and then you can have internet radio on the go. Pretty good. Also has a TF card slot, again under the bottom there, we'll have a look at that in a moment. Up to 32 gigabyte for MP3 format songs. Bluetooth 5.2 if you want to use it as a Bluetooth speaker. Has a 5000 mAh battery capacity. I'll have a look in a minute. I think they're replaceable. I think they might be 18650 cells. So I think you might be able to replace the battery. Not 100% sure on that. And a very large, and it says 15 watt speaker. So it should go quite loud and it should sound really, really nice. Now, one feature that I can see straight away is really useful for having Wi-Fi enabled radio is to update the firmware. Now, when you get the radio, it should have the very latest firmware, but I found with these Chinese companies, they tend to like to improve the products really, really quickly. And that's really, really good. Really, really good. Really, really good. Yeah. Let's have a quick look around the front of the radio. So firstly, there are a lot of buttons and they do light up as well, which is a very, very good feature for late at night use. It does look quite confusing at first, I must admit, but when you break it down, most of these buttons you see are associated with the internet or the RFI side of the radio. That's where a lot of the development money has gone. And as far as normal RF radio and those modes, they only really correspond to these buttons here, other than the numerical keyboard, of course. So for example, if you want to change to 100 FM, you put in 100, but you have to put in the extra digit 1000, and then it jumps to 100 FM. Whilst you're in the FM mode, or in fact medium wave or shortwave, if you want to add a favourite, you just simply press the little heart symbol there that adds to the favourites list, and I think that's really, really useful, very quick and easy to use. Moving on to medium wave, again numerical input if you want to do it that way, or basic search by using the VFO, or frequency search. I tend not to use the scan search on these DSP radios. I just don't think it's all that sensitive. Now what is interesting with medium wave, and we'll hear it in a moment, is you can adjust the bandwidth, which is quite unusual to be fair. And then you've got this indoor and outdoor, which I think is that one. I know that's the bandwidth, so it'll be that one. Yeah, indoor and outdoor. Now this refers to the antenna system. So whilst it's on indoor, it uses a standard ferrite rod internal antenna, and in outdoor you can use the whip antenna on medium wave. I think it would be easier if they just put external and internal. It would have made that a little bit easier to understand. And I can't find any RF gain or antenna attenuation, which again is quite useful on medium wave, especially if you're getting cross mode interference or something like that. So yeah, okay, that's quite useful. But as I say, we'll take this outside and we'll test it. And then you've got your shortwave. It launches straight into AM. Shows you the meter band as well. Once again, you can change the bandwidth, and that will use the telescopic whip antenna unless you plug in an external antenna. If you press the shortwave button again, it takes you straight into the upper and lower sidebands. What is good is that along with your VFO, which is 1 kHz tuning, the fine tune takes that down to, what's that, 1/100th of a kilohertz, which, so your fine tune basically is a BFO, beat frequency oscillator. It's not, but that's how it works. And again, we'll be testing that a little bit later, but I do like that. I think that is very good. You can also change the step rate, I believe, up to 5 kHz as well. But I think that's more for AM broadcast. And again, as I say, to press it into upper sideband, just press that. Full coverage, of course, right up to 30 megs, so it will get the CB band. And then below that we have the Bluetooth function. This turns the radio into a Bluetooth speaker. I'm not sure, but I don't think it supports Bluetooth headphones. I haven't tried it. I don't suppose I'll get a chance on this test, but they normally don't. And then TF card, basically, once you've put your tracks on a TF card, you can play them. We will try that. And then moving down below it, we have tag. I'm not quite sure what that does at the moment, to be perfectly honest. Again, I think it's associated with internet radio. And then we go into the main menu. Now again, the menu system is purely for the internet radio. It does not affect the RF side of the radio. And then you've got your search parameters here. You can search by region, which is quite useful. And also you can change your upper and lower sideband. So we'll go into Europe here. All European. Russian Federation is quite useful. Are they European? Not sure. And then we've got United Kingdom now. And again, once this loads up, you've got different genre here. Yeah, I mean, I did search for some podcasts. It sort of works, but I think really BBC Radio, these are what I'm going to be using most of all. And there's all your BBC Radio, including the World Service, which is probably the one that I'm going to use the most. But they're all your BBC stations, 13. So yeah, very, very easy to use on the internet side. And then over here, again, you've got these buttons which are genre really. If you press the music button there, it will try and come up with music stations. The trouble is with the internet radio, there is so many different variety of radio stations, and we're talking over 40,000. Then it's almost like too much choice. So we get lots of foreign stations, which is, you know, it's kind of good. It's like shortwave. You can certainly hear a lot of culture, but your normal ones come up, like Capital Radio come up there. And again with news, yeah, it's okay. It should bring up the BBC. Yeah, great. So the first choice, BBC World Service. Biased or unbiased, I don't know, but that's what I would go to. And then these are all your other international news channels, including the Voice of America, which I quite like to listen to as well. And that just goes on. There's quite a few of them, as you can see. So plenty to listen to. And there's certainly a good variety on internet radio. So I think that's quite useful. And then over here, we've got your usual scan and seek buttons for the RF radio. Now, one thing I will say is that when you let's just choose a station here, for example. It just takes a few seconds to load. On the bottom here, you've got a kind of tuning dial. So that tells you the station before and the station afterwards. And if you want to, instead of having to go through all that, you can just literally turn your tuning dial, and then it will go through, and hopefully it will load
it will load that station. Some of these radio stations load a little bit slower. It depends what sort of output, or what, it's not bandwidth, is it, but bit rate they're using. You say that's loaded that one, and then we can go back. So yeah, there's plenty of ways to tune the radio with the internet side of it. Again, you've got the language button here. You can change this into all different languages. We'll just stick with English, obviously. Coming up the top here, we've got the favourites button, which we've already looked at. This is a back button, so wherever you've been, if you get lost, if you just press that, it takes you back to the last function, which is quite useful. Then we come into the settings menu, and obviously data SIM card if you're going to use a 4G SIM card, Wi-Fi, backlit control, quite useful here. You've got all the different settings you'd normally have. Mine's set to always, and again, if this is flickering on the camera, it's not in real life. Autoplay, I assume that's for the radio stations, that they automatically play when you tune into them. Here's your FM stereo step there. I believe it's 100 or 1000, and it goes up to 1000. Oh no, sorry, 50, 100, 200. So 100 kilohertz is what I'd normally use. Medium wave step, very important for the US markets, and we've got 9K here for UK, and you can set it to 10 for the US. Not entirely sure what that is. Now, version info, this is the firmware. So there we go. So it's telling I've got 4.62, blah 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 blah. So a new version is available. Please insert a TF card no larger than 32 gigabytes. And this is what I said before, so you don't have to connect to a computer. You can use the Wi-Fi on the radio. I'm not going to do that firmware update on this video, it'll take too long. I might do it on a separate video, but that is very useful. And to get out of that, just press the back button. Takes us straight back into the radio. Clock timer, playtime limit, schedule power off, alarm clock, and then a simple lock button to lock all of the keys. So once you get into it, the radio isn't that difficult to use really. It does look a little bit difficult at first, but I'm sure you can get to grips with it, and that's a good thing because the instructions are absolutely rubbish. So on the side of the radio here, you have the 3 pots. First one is your VFO tuning, which it is a stepped control, feels very very nice, and also there is a select function by pushing it in, which is how you select the tuning on the frequency there, and also the menu system. No problem at all. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of a moan, because one thing that I don't like about the radio, and I did tell you there'd be things I didn't like, and I really don't see why they've done this, is the external antenna socket is there. And that is just a few millimeters away from the tuning VFO. Now, it just so happens that I use this small adapter, and that fits in okay, even though it does restrict the VFO. But it might be that you've got a adapter that goes straight onto your 259, for example, and that's really annoying because you're never going to get that in. Why they didn't just fit an external socket on the back, I honestly don't know. So yeah, I don't like that at all. I think that's ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. Below that, you've got a standard USB-C, just mainly for charging the batteries. You can do the firmware update via the radio. Then we have the fine tune. Again, it's a stepped pot, but it's nice and linear. And that is also a switching pot as well, so you push that in. And there's various different functions and controls that works with. And then below that, it is just the volume control. I say a very nice linear pot, feels analog. Really quite like that. And as we just worked out, it can switch the radio off. And then above that, we have a headphone socket or headphone jack, which isn't a bad. I think that's fine. That's absolutely fine. The sockets are 3.5mm, and they seem to have a brass construction as well, so they look quite high quality. Just don't know why they did that. Moving on to the back of the radio. So the first thing I notice when I look at it is there's no kickstand, or there's no wire frame to fold out. And that's a bit of a shame, because how I like to listen to my radios normally would be with the radio leaning sort of like this, and with the antenna up and then facing towards the front. Now the antenna does rotate, but it doesn't rotate 360 degrees. There is a ball joint, and it doesn't pull up. Sometimes they pull up on radio, so you can rotate them around the front. So it is a bit restrictive to where it rotates. But without a kickstand, there's no way of leaning the radio, and it makes it just a little bit awkward to use. And it is heavy. It has got a big speaker in here with a big magnet, and as you can see, it wants to fall over. So not sure, but it wouldn't have cost really much to have put a little kickstand in there. That's something maybe they need to improve upon. Battery cover here, and yeah, I did check, and it does say on here actually you have got two 18650 cells, 4000 mAh milliamp hours. You've got two little torque screws there, so if you were going on a long camping trip or something and you couldn't charge the battery, although I do believe it's got a very long battery time, I probably won't get around to testing it on the video, but you can just swap the 18650s out. And that's no problem. Bottom of the radio does have rubber feet, which is quite nice, and it needs it because it is quite bottom heavy. And then we have the TF card slot here for MP3 music playback. And then finally we've got a little slot for a SIM card, so it will take a 4G pay-as-you-go SIM card, which gives you the internet radio on the move. That's quite nice. Nothing on this side, just a little slot there for the wrist lanyard, but as I mentioned, it is quite a heavy radio. So yeah, so overall it's nice. I like the layout. Definitely a very nice feeling pots. I've had no sort of issues with these sort of missing, or no issues at all. So yeah, it's really nice. Just needs, in my opinion, a kickstand just to make it a little bit easier to use. So that's it. I think we should listen to it now. We'll do the internet radio in the shack now, and then we'll take it outside and we'll listen to the conventional FM, medium wave, shortwave bands. Let's have a quick look, listen to some of the BBC stations. So we'll select the world service first. Now you can get world service on DAB, of course, and unfortunately this radio doesn't have DAB on FM, which is something that I miss. Would have been nice maybe if it had got that. Let's have a quick listen.
What made you want to tell this intergenerational end-of-life story?
I always wanted to make this kind of film. I mean, the film that tells story about everyday life. And I happened to grow up in the big family. And when you have so many generations, so many people, so many believe in the same house, you kind
so to me, and my hearing is defective, but that sounds very nice and clear on the spoken voice. Really nice. And if I think it sounds good, then you should also. So I think to go back, we just press that. So back into BBC. Let's see Radio 4. And that will load up quite quick on the load up time.
Right back immediately, within 90 seconds of getting it, saying, yes, I will find the money, I will find the producers, this film has to be told. And secretly I was really terrified that 1,000 other people would have got the same form letter and would want to make it before me, and I could not possibly allow that. But I pushed send and then was really horrified at what I'd done, because I wasn't qualified to make these promises. I'd never done it before.
Let's try Radio 2 this time. I have to be careful for music.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine that lineup? The Beatles, Rolling Stones, Cliff Richard, and Dusty Springfield. Wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. For a point, on their top 10 single in 1982, which great British rockers suggested we should run to the hills?
Radio 3. Wow, look at that, Radio Caroline. I wonder if that's the pirate station that was, or was it off the North Sea? Let's give that a go. Have to be so careful for copyright. Yeah, I'm not sure really. So the next one is Capital, so I think we go down for that, maybe. Capital Radio. Best I can do on that. Yeah, it sounds really good actually with music. There's a certain amount of bass there. It's not overpowering. It seems quite tight and quite controlled. It certainly sounds really, really nice. You can listen to music on this, no problem. Try one more. I'm going to get hit with a copyright strike. Well, that's quite bassy. That one's you can actually feel the bass resonating through the cabinet on the radio. There's no reflex port out the back, which you sometimes get. But that's quite bassy. That's as much as I can risk. So yeah, it sounds really, really nice actually on music. And I've got to say, since I've been having it, I've been using the internet radio more and more. I've had internet radios before, and you do find them very easy to use. Okay, we'll go over to the normal RF side now. And as I say, I'm going to come out of the shack because I've got so much interference up here, and we'll try the different modes and we'll see what it sounds like. But so far, I'm going to say it sounds and it receives really, really nice. Here we are then, we're in the great outdoors. A little bit of sunshine, but it is quite cold in the UK today. But I think that's the best way to test the radio. So we have heard what the speaker sounds like indoors. Also there's aircraft and lots of things going on. So what I'll do is I will connect the radio directly into the mic input in the camera, and we can have a listen. I do apologise about the reflections on the screen. I'll do my best to try and get round that, but let's start with some FM reception.
You, Joe in Norfolk.
My scene I'd like to delete from my past was when I first left school and I was fresh into my new job, and there was a chap there that I really liked and trying to impress him basically on a daily basis, and I walked past him while he was sat on a bus, and I was sort of looking at him, and I walked straight into a drain pipe. And the next day I saw him and he was laughing and he was like, oh my gosh, you're just like Mr. Bean.
Yeah. What about you, Amanda?
Then surely that would fall under the Consumer Credit Act, and you would be able to put in a claim through that loans company.
Well, I've tried to, I've emailed them multiple times. They don't really respond by email, so every time I call them.
Woozy feel. How about Michael Talkie's Bright Blue music? Much more cheerful. Well, Viv in Buckinghamshire also wants this, and Rab Nielsen agrees. He says it must be Michael Talkie's Bright Blue music, a lovely bright piece to go with the bright skies and sun that days here in South Ayrshire.
We have the drums which come in, which is this driving beat.
Reflects on her life and career.
Well, nothing wrong with that on the FM performance. In fact, I was quite impressed by that. As always, the auto-seek on these DSP radios, it's not the most intuitive. It does tend to miss out stations. It's always best to go through it manually. But yeah, nothing at all. I can really criticise that. It sounded quite nice and clear, especially with the speaking voice. Pretty decent on FM. So let's move on and let's test the AM, and we can try the two different antennas. We can try the external and the internal antenna.
We've had that in 1995 and again in 1982. Wow. So, you know, when I'm talking about temperature of minus 20 degrees in northern Scotland on Thursday nights,
Yeah.
you know, we're not that far off the lowest recorded temperature. You know, it's still a way to get to the 27, but, you know, minus 20 in the UK is still relatively uncommon. You have to go back to 2021 when we had a few occurrences of it, but before that, 20...
time consuming to get to decisions, so of course you have to communicate.
Yeah.
I've sat in stadiums and gone, no, this can't be right. You cannot have fans sitting in a football.
Because I'm going to have this conversation. Yeah, see me. I got a tattoo, my first ever tattoo last year.
Did you?
Thanks for that. Thanks for that.
Can you reveal where it is?
Oh,
is it yours? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't...
058, if you've got any comments.
Track of the Hour is brought to you by the Palms Hotel. Venue for every celebration. Catering from 100 to 650 guests at the Palms.
Got to be honest, I felt a little bit underwhelmed by that. I was expecting a little bit more, especially as we could change to the telescopic whip antenna. I think on the internal whip antenna, it did okay. It sounded okay. It got the main stations that we've got left on medium wave. Didn't really do any better than a much cheaper radio though. It's nice that you can adjust the bandwidth, but once again it didn't sound outstanding. When I changed to the longer whip antenna, it brought in more stations as you'd expect. However, it was laying the stations one over the top of each other, so you were hearing two stations at once. Might have been able to, maybe if I reduced the length of the antenna to reduce the gain. And this is what I said, I think, before. Without a RF control or a attenuator, an attenuation on the antenna, you're going to get that. It's going to bring in all sorts of cross-mode modulation, what we'd call on radio, and so it's going to stack the stations up. An RF gain control would just be able to turn that down. And yeah, that was quite apparent on some of those weaker medium wave stations, getting stacked with more powerful stations. So yeah, it's okay on medium wave, but I was expecting a lot more, to be honest. Anyway, let's try and move on to shortwave and see if I can get anything in the garden.
In terms of your service sector, which is, I think, thanks to the tourism industries and others, the PMI reading in December for Spain in the service sector is 57.3. So that just shows very strong business activities in the service sector. And the manufacturing sector reading is a 53.3. So again, in the expansionary zone.
Est-ce que c'est un de Marie qui parle et à chaque fois je me suis dit non en fait, je préfère aller à l'exercice. C'est un peu comme, je ne sais pas, quand Annie nous raconte quelque chose et c'est un peu décousu. Mais on écoute finalement sans interrompre parce que même si ce n'est pas clair, même si c'est un peu confus, ce qui compte c'est ce que cette Annie nous met des contes, des descriptions parfois un peu crues, des bouts de souvenirs, des bouts de rêves. Donc tout cela compose un univers intérieur. C'est l'univers de cette écrivaine qui est très libre dans son expression. Et je pense que c'est là sa force. Elle donne à lire tout cela et ça éblouit constamment. et on est parfois perdu en chemin, mais je pense que le côté poétique est vraiment très...
So I think it did okay on shortwave there. I mean, this is about midday in the UK. It gets so cold and dark later on in the afternoon, so it's not the best time to actually try the radio out. Once again though, without a antenna attenuator control or an RF gain control, if you like, you have to manually raise and lower the whip antenna to adjust the gain to try and filter out local interference. The bandwidth adjustment helps, but yeah, a gain control on the antenna would make that a lot easier. But I think it did okay, considering it's not the best time of day. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to an external antenna. I've got this little SW GA800 here, which is a small, I think it's 27 centimetre loop antenna, and that is slightly directional, but also that will help filter out some of the local interference, because I am very close to an AM station. So we're going to go back over those stations we picked up and see how they sound with the external antenna.
Review. Living Romania. Next in the Ami with her latest hit entitled Among the Stars.
Today in Vice President Kamala Harris her electricity results. But standing honorably and we have done in this nation for hundreds of years. So I think it's really important when you look at and whether we're living in the past or just, again, holding people accountable. You know, we're only talking 4 years ago. We're not talking 40. I think it's really important that when as we move into the future and move forward, that we are acknowledging that, again, you are held accountable in the country when you commit crimes, when you attempt a coup, when you participate in treasonous activities. Over 100 we run very mindfully, very demurely.
Inside Romania. Happy New Year, with many interesting topics in this show. I'm Anna Maria Popescu, and we start the new year by reviewing some of the unique initiatives that we presented to you in last year's episode.
Detainees up to 170,000. From the current under 100,000. So you will see that to be a priority. The border will come under control. Immigration, illegal immigration will be controlled. That is absolutely feasible, and that will be the number one priority beyond the fiscal policies that we referred to earlier.
You know, doing some research on this issue, Imani, if I can, before I came out.
Trade and imports, and states like Michigan or states like Wisconsin that rely heavily on selling their product to China and overseas, this could be a serious issue for Trump, depending on how he navigates that and the policies that go forth in Washington.
Well, I think that's very much a case of what Trump is very skilled at. He made the argument during the campaign, tariffs across the board, everybody, including Canada, including Mexico, and now that's kind of modulated a bit to where he kind of understands it, maybe has gotten a memo from.
I think the LC90 worked quite well there with the SW GA800. I mean, you have to be quite precise when you're trying to pick up these distant shortwave stations. I think it handled it quite well. Definitely better than the standard whip, as you probably would expect with an amplified loop antenna. So I think we want to go after some ham bands now on SSB, and then maybe we'll go into the CB band, but for that I'll probably take it up into the shack and I'll connect it to my Antron 99 outdoor antenna.
100%. Many thanks for the QSL information. Your radio reports 59 Stanley B on my side in this moment. A very good signal in this moment. Please repeat again your complete name.
Je vous entends plus du tout et puis j'ai un gros problème. Je pense que mon alimentation va pas tarder à fumer, donc il faut que j'arrête et puis que je la change.
Έτσι άλλο να είσαι στους περακάμπους που είναι οι ελιές και άλλο να είσαι μέσα στο δάσος με τα θεόρατα δέντρα εκεί, κυπαρίσια, δεν ξέρω τι, πεύκους ή έλατα. Ωραία.
Lima Zulu 4 Tango X-ray, contest. Echo Alpha 59169. Oh, 36, thank you. X-ray 36, 59, 74. Delta Lima 4, Sierra Hotel Echo. Good afternoon, Airport 59, 07575. DL4, DL1, Sierra Mike Alpha, thank you. 59235. Echo 1-2, thank you. 3-1, Echo 1-2. Thank you, Charlie. Tango Alpha 4, Charlie, Sierra. Contact. 4 Hotel Kilo Foxtrot, buenos días. 59150. CQ contest. Lima Zulu 7 Germany. Lima Zulu 7 Germany, contest.
But the antenna I've got now is about 6 meters up, and I've not really been kind of, technically minded, I'll be honest. Roger, it's a bit of an inspiration when you speak to people who have made their entire radios and all the equipment. So good for you, mate. It's working well anyway. You're still nicely over the 20, Roger. Oh, thank you very much, Jim. Most appreciated. Okay.
I would say that overall the SSB performance of the radio is okay. It's passable. It's not exceptional. There are other DSP radios that do better. There are some that do worse. I think there's a couple of things they could improve upon. Now, one of the problems with DSP, and when I say that, that's digital signal processing. One of the problems with DSP tuning is that on the 1 kilohertz steps, they all mute, which some people really, really hate. You learn to live with it, but other manufacturers, like for example the Radi RF919, they've been able to make the fine tune, or your BFO clarifier, if you like. They've been able to make that linear and drop the muting. This one unfortunately mutes on both the coarse tune and the fine tune. Let me just demonstrate that. So this is the coarse tune. And then the fine tune. So it does make clarifying the stations that little bit more difficult. I think that's something they could work on. Another thing which you may have heard there, and again this affects most DSP radios, is you still get that crashing static noise when a station comes in over the static. You get like a and what's happening there is the AGC, or the automatic gain control on the radio, it's locked onto the static, and then when you get the station come in, the signal increases, and the AGC is just too slow to respond to that, and then you get that as it finds its gain point, and then it settles down. A lot of other radios, unfortunately, with DSP do the same thing. Now, what they could do, if you had a attenuator, an attenuation control, an RF gain control, what you can do is, once you've found your signal, you can back that off, reduce the signal, and give the AGC a little bit more chance to lock on. as this radio, there is no attenuation or RF gain control. Unfortunately, you are stuck with that, which is a bit of a shame. And I think it's something, again, they could probably work on with a future firmware update. But overall, I've been playing with this for a couple of hours now on sideband, and the conditions haven't been particularly good today. But yeah, I've been able to make out stations and hear stations, so it does work. Going to try out the TF card now with some crappy YouTube music. So press TF card. Please insert a TF card. It's a bit awkward that you have to go in underneath. I mean, you've got all this space on the side of the radio. I don't know quite why they put it underneath there, but so these are just got. This is just a small 2 megabyte card here. It only takes up to 32 megs on the card, which is quite low, really. Okay. Right, okay, so it says restart to initialize TF card. Press OK. It's not liking that card that I put in. Seems to have locked up now. Nothing is working on the radio. We're stuck on this screen. Now that MP3 card has worked on all of my other radios that I've tested last year. I think we'll take it out. For some reason, the radio didn't like that at all. A bit odd. And we seem to be in a bit of a problem now where it's locked up. So I'm going to have to restart it. So yeah, unable to test the MP3 function, unfortunately. Not quite sure why. It's just a standard little 2 gigabyte card. Okay, going to move on. Let's test the Bluetooth. I'll link it to my iPhone and we'll see how that sounds. So switch to Bluetooth. Oh, it's connected straight to my phone. I had connected it before. Let me try and find something copyright free. See what it sounds like.
Absorption rate of between 6.5 and 16 grays. Almost everyone would die. In the second category, which included almost the same number of people, who had absorbed between 4.2 and 6.4 grays, about 1/3 would die. For the patients who had absorbed between 2.2 and 4.1...
Not very cheerful, is it, my audiobook choice? It sounds really nice, actually. And one thing I'm going to say is that the speaker, they've spent a bit of money on this speaker. There's definitely a separation as well. You can hear the sort of bass and the treble. It's quite spatial. I might have to investigate and find out. I wonder if it's a two-way cone device, probably a 4-inch. And maybe it's got a separate tweeter. But yeah, very nice sounding machine.
Followed in the years after the accident were not attributed by the doctors to the radiation exposure. The doctors from Moscow who came to Pripyat on April the 26th.
One thing that I just want to quickly try, it has a voice search function, which could be really, really helpful if you're partially sighted. So I believe if we go into the menu system, we go to search. If we hold down this language button, it should activate it. BBC Radio 4. It's got it. Nothing on the screen. Shut down. Didn't like that, did it? So we try again. Hold down the language button. Okay, it's just checking network connection now. pressing the button. No, it doesn't seem to have. Oh, we seem to have broken it. We definitely caused it an issue by doing that. Nothing seems to work now. I'm holding down the power button and doesn't seem to want to restart. So yeah, there's a few issues, isn't there? I mean, I think there's a few issues that they still perhaps need to work out. And this freezing up is a little bit annoying. Anyway, let's move on and get to the conclusion part of the video. One thing to add before we get on to my conclusions on this LC90 is that I was halfway through the video and CHOYONG contacted me and said, Fred, we've already launched firmware version 4.7 if you'd like to update your radio. But as I was halfway through the review, I thought I'd carry on with 4.6. I'll put it up on the screen, but I've printed it off here. And there's a couple of things that I think are quite relevant to my review. Firstly, they've added the RDS function to FM, which was something that I did criticise the radio for not having. And also on SSB, when you tune around, there was a few pops that I noticed. It wasn't too bad, but it was there. And apparently the firmware improves upon that. It eliminates that. And there's other things as well. One thing I've noticed, when you look on the website of this radio, there's two versions. There's the Chinese version and then there's the Euro version. They seem about the same price. I was trying to make out what the difference was between the two, and I think what it is purely the licensing agreements for the internet radio, certainly on podcasts and things like that. I'm not sure who gets the better deal. I have a feeling the Chinese version might be a little bit more open than the Western version, but I think it's purely down to licensing. I don't think the features on the radio are that much different. So conclusions then. Well, this radio is always going to be controversial, and the reason it's going to be controversial is the internet side of the radio, because, and I do get this, a lot of you would have probably, right at the beginning of the video, you'd have seen that it's an internet radio and you'd have said, well, Fred, it's a lot of money for an internet radio. I don't need one, Fred. I can use my mobile phone, I can access all of these radio stations, and I could buy a decent Bluetooth speaker, and with the money left I could also get a decent shortwave radio and still save a few quid. And you know, you could, and I totally get that. It's just, for me, and this might just be me, I think my opinion is stuck in the late 90s. I think that's the way it is. But it's just to me that, you know, a mobile phone is my mobile phone, basically. And I don't want to load up loads and loads of different apps and advertising on my mobile phone. I also don't really want to spank the battery when I'm using it during the day. I like to keep my mobile phone pretty much fully charged. I just got that thing in the back of my mind. You never know if you're going to get called away on an emergency or something, and you're going to need your mobile phone. So for me, a phone is a phone, and this is a radio. I like a radio with lots of knobs and lots of buttons and tuning and a built-in speaker. That's what I like. Mobile phone to me just doesn't cut it, even with a decent Bluetooth speaker. So I think there's a difference between the two, and I will always choose a radio. Now, I said speaker. Now, do you remember when we just a while ago, we did the MP3 sounds, and I said that the speaker sounded particularly good. Well, I delved into the design of the radio a little bit further. Maybe I should have done that at the beginning of the video. And it turns out that behind this metal grille, you've actually got a three-way speaker system. You've got a bass driver, a soft silk domed tweeter, and then a passive bass radiator cone. And that's why it sounds so good. That's quite extraordinary, really, because the only other sound system that I own personally that has that kind of setup is my Bose surround speakers, which we got downstairs. That's quite high end, and obviously someone has spent quite a bit of time thinking about the sound reproduction on this radio, and of course that's why it does sound so good. So let's bring us on to the conclusion then. Well, firstly, there is the price to consider. It's not a cheap radio. You'll have to check it out on the website for your area, but we're looking at round about the £200 mark, and that brings it up to the higher end radios that we've tested on the channel. So yeah, it's not cheap. You have to bear that in mind. As far as handling on the radio goes, I did have a couple of issues with it. For some reason, it happened, I think, twice. The radio would just completely lock up randomly, and I'd have to switch it on and then switch it off. And then one time, it completely froze up on me, and then I had to take the battery cover off and remove the batteries. Hasn't occurred since, and it was quite cold up here when I was playing with it. But it's something hopefully that they can maybe look at in a firmware update. And that's another thing, is the firmware updates on this radio. Now, originally when this radio was launched, and I do remember because they've forgotten, but they contacted me via email. When it was launched, it had no SSB, it was just shortwave. And a lot of people, me included, went back to them and said, you know what, for the money you're asking, you need to include SSB. So they've included SSB via the firmware. And they will continually update the firmware and make improvements. It's quite amazing what they can change on the radio just on the firmware. And they will listen to customer feedback, including your comments on this video. They will sit down and they will read them, and they will act accordingly. And I think that's really, really good. Now, people sometimes knock these Chinese companies, but honestly, they really want to get it right, and they really want their customers to be happy with the product. If you buy a mainstream product, Panasonic, Sony or something, and you email them with suggestions or, dare I say, a complaint, your email gets lost in hundreds of thousands of others. It's very unlikely that they will change the product to suit your preference. But these smaller Chinese companies, credit to them, they will do that. So finally, we're going to get down to the bottom line conclusion, my opinion, what I think of this radio. And I'd like to be honest on Fred in the Shed. So if you said to me, Fred, is that the best shortwave and sideband radio that I could buy? I'd say no, it's not. Because we've looked at comparable or even better shortwave radios on this channel last year, which cost a lot less money. Does that make this a bad buy? No, it doesn't. There was a saying that used to go around when I was into astronomy a few years ago. It's on the Astro forums, and I can adapt it for radio, but the saying went like this: your best radio is the one that you use the most. It may not be your most expensive, it may not be your most technically advanced, it may not be your best receiving radio, because sometimes those radios maybe are a little bit too expensive or a little bit too advanced, and they end up being on the shelf or just put in a cupboard somewhere. Now, your best radio is the one that you're going to use from day to day, the one you're going to get the best value for money out of. And surprisingly, I've had this in the shack 3 weeks, and that's what I've found. I've been picking this up and using it more than any other radio. Mostly as well on the internet side, World Service, BBC Radio 4, even tried a couple of the podcast channels. They're a little bit hit and miss. But I've used it a lot. And for casual shortwave SSB listening, just for checking out to see if the bands are open on the triple nickel, 555, things like that, with the appropriate antenna plugged in, it's perfectly fine. So that is quite surprising, really. And you might not agree with me, because I know you're going to have your own opinion, and I totally respect your opinion, and please let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. But yeah, it's possibly the best all-round radio that you can currently buy. And that maybe quite surprised me a little bit. Now, if you're interested in this radio. I'm not on any commission or any kickback or anything like that. They sent it in free, of course, for me to do with you. I do appreciate that. But if you're interested, there'll be a link in the description. I'm so new with this company, I can't get you a discount at the moment, unfortunately. But I do believe that on the website there are days on seasons where they do discounts. So maybe check that out. But the link will be in the description. And that's about it for this video. It turned out a long video. It had to be. There were so many different features on this radio we needed to look at. I'd like to sincerely thank you for sticking with the video. If you've sat through the whole thing, that was a hell of a challenge. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for your view time. I get very little views on this channel per video, so I do appreciate you dropping by. And I'd just like to say, in front of the camera, for a change, please, 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 look after each other, stay safe, and of course, I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, guys.
Fred's in the shed where the magic unfolds. Fred in the shed with his trusty CB. He's a friend to the lonely on a frequency.